Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in for today's session. We'll be doing chapters 5 and 6 of Masters on the Path. We've covered more than 60%, 70% of the book at this time, and we'll be going through more of the chapters and learning some very interesting tidbits as we go along. Right, so before we begin, let's start with an invocation. Please sit straight in a receptive posture. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Hold your breath for a few moments and then exhale. And as you exhale and release, free your aura of all the stress and tension that you're carrying around. Take a deep breath. Inhale the divine healing energy. Make yourself receptive to all the light, all the knowledge that's going to be coming in shortly. Hold your breath for a few moments and then exhale and release all the stress, all the tension, any unnecessary thoughts and emotions. Hold your breath for a few moments. Feel the blessings accumulate. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And breathe. Let's invoke to the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, to my spiritual teacher, to all the spiritual teachers, the Holy Gurus, Holy Masters, Saints, Archangels, Holy Angels, and spiritual helpers, to my higher self, to my guardian angels, to the angels of love and wisdom, to the angels of theosophy, to the angels of health and healing. We thank you for your blessings of divine light, divine love, divine power, divine healing, divine guidance, divine protection. For your blessings of abundance, prosperity, and spirituality, for making us aware of the secrets of these teachings, and for helping us to use these to become a better person and a better soul, to be of service. We thank you. We thank you in full faith. Take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale slowly and deeply, and be aware. When you're ready, open your eyes. Atma Namaste, thank you for being here. In the last session, we covered the path of probation, where we spoke about many of the characteristics which are required by the masters in their journey, of the students in their journey. Among the things which was covered was the importance of good words and not using, contra-indicative or contradictory words. And a question was asked about the language paradox. Like, for sometimes we use things like, oh, this was awfully good, this was damn good, and stuff like that. But in day-to-day language, in colloquial language, we utilize these words. So what happens if we do use them? Does this make us any lesser? Does this make us any liable to fall off the path? The answer to this question will be answered at a later chapter, and it's going to be there. Now, if the paradox if the probation has already happened, then comes acceptance. And that's when the Holy Masters will ask us that, have you finally decided that you'll work under me and devote yourself to the service of humanity? So in this case, one particular boy, in the soul form, of course, replied very earnestly that yes, he meant to do so. And so the Holy Master continued that I have been very pleased with the efforts that you have made. Now, I'd like you to imagine that you have actually made an effort to put yourself as service to humanity, to all the beings that we share our space with on Earth. And you can imagine that this conversation is happening between you and a Holy Master. Why not? Visualization works, right? So you've been asked that, have you decided that you'll work under the Holy Master and devote yourself for service? And you say, yes, absolutely. So then the Master tells us that they've been very pleased with the efforts that we've made, and they hope that we'll not relax the efforts. So don't forget, under the new conditions, that the work and the determination which we have shown have enabled the Holy Master to shorten the period of probation. And therefore, they are pleased that we have chosen the shortest of all roads to progress, that of bringing others with you to the path. So, being on the path of spirituality is a not simple process to begin with, but one of the fastest ways of accelerating our own progress is by bringing others with us onto the path. So, absolutely unselfish love is the strongest power in the world, the Master continued. But there are very few who can keep it pure, free from jealousy, free from exaction, free from wanting favors in return, even if it's for just one thing. So our advancement is due to our success in keeping the flame of unselfish love of service burning for multiple times, all the time. So we've done a lot to develop our inner strength, but we still need more of it. We must acquire discrimination and alertness so that what we see is wanted at the right moment. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you pay attention to the text over here, it is about being aware of what you need to do at the moment it is needed, not 10 minutes later. So the higher beings need for us to be discriminant, to be aware. So before we speak or act, we have to think very carefully what the consequences should be. But we do well, we have progressed well, and the higher beings are pleased with our practices. So then what happens is, now if you want to visualize, you may do so, that the higher being lays his hand, the Holy Master lays his hand on the head of each of the candidates separately, saying, I accept you as my chela, chela meaning student, according to the ancient rituals, the ancient rites. Now, in turn, he draws each student into his aura. So for a few moments, the pupil disappears into his energy. And then after some time, the pupil emerges looking very happy, noble, showing the special characteristics of the master as they'd never done before. So the Holy Master's energy is then imbued deeply into the aura of the student. And then the student emerges completely recharged, refreshed, revitalized. And when this is done, the master calls each of those students who've been accepted and says, I give you my blessings. And then he speaks to all of them together saying, come with me, I must present you with your new character for official recognition and registration. So this is all still very, very official. There is apparently some spiritual paperwork that needs to be done. So then the Holy Master takes them over to the Mahachohan, the Mahachohan who's in charge of all the evolution of all humanity and all of that big responsibility. So he's then taken, all the students are then taken by the master to the Mahachohan, who then looks over them very keenly and says, you guys are still very young. Of course, he doesn't say you guys. I assume he says it in a much more noble and regal way. But you are still very young, and I congratulate you on reaching such a position so early. Please see that you live up to the standard, to the level which you have attained. And then he enters their names into the record, it's called the imperishable record. Some may call it the Akashic records, or there are many such names for this. But in essence, a record is made which shows the column beside their names, showing that he'll have more entries to make, that, okay, they're at the level of being accepted as a pupil, and then they can go higher and higher as they initiated more and more. Now, once the visit with the Mahachohan is done, the master takes the pupils once more to the cave back near his house, and they watch him dissolve into thin air the living images of themselves, which he had made some time before. And if you remember from the previous session, the master creates from etheric matter, astral matter, mental matter, an image of the student, an image of their subtle bodies. And whatever the student feels or thinks, it reflects in that living image. So it's like a 3D hologram working in real time. Okay? That hologram, that image which he has created, the master then dissolves. He then dissolves it, saying that now that you're actually a part of me, because the master's aura and the pupil's aura are now united, the master no longer needs a 3D image. Okay? You can think of it like this. If you're, say, for example, visualize someone's in a long distance relationship, you will want photos and videos of your beloved, of your partner. But when you actually meet them face to face after some time and you hug them, you no longer need that image or that photo, that video or anything. You're physically right there. Okay? I suppose I could have used the example of being in a Zoom call, but then I don't visualize any hugging happening in a physical class. Anywho, social distancing and whatnot. Now, if one observes this ceremony with the sight of the causal body, okay, you have the etheric, astral, mental, and the causal body. If they see the ceremony with the image of the causal body, they will see the master as a glorious globe of living fire containing a number of concentric shells of color. Okay, this shell, these lights of color are brilliant. They are absolutely magnificent, and they're glowing in multiple ways. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Seems like my good old Zoom has decided that the energy is too much. Hello, am I visible? I guess you guys are sort of stuck with me today on the screen, as opposed to seeing what is on the screen itself. So anyway, what I'm going to say is, if you observe the ceremony, you will see the master as a glorious globe of living fire. Okay, it's burning, it's shining, it's moving all over. The physical body of the master and the counterparts of it is extending to a radius of many, 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 many meters. So the Holy Master is right there in the center, okay? And the energy of the Holy Master, the causal body of the Holy Master, is like a ring of fire, it's like a ball of fire radiating outwards. And as the pupil approaches the ball of the fire, their own aura gets purified. Their own aura starts glowing and becomes of finer and finer matter. So by the time the pupil penetrates deep into the aura of the master himself, and the master actually embraces the pupil, their energies become unified, their energies become one. And when this happens, there is no separation. The master and the pupil are thoroughly and deeply, deeply connected. Let me see if I can put this back on the screen for you. Where is this? There. That's what it kind of looks like. So you've got the, now I took this obviously from the internet. On the first image, you see what the Holy Master's energy is like, and he's radiating these concentric rings of fire. So you can see it from above, you can see it from the sides, and those sparks are basically the pupils being integrated deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, it's expected that the student will be constantly thinking about the teacher, and by constantly meditating upon his teacher and aspiring to be one with the teacher, the pupil also causes his own vehicles, his own body to raise in its vibrations. Therefore, the pupil is always expecting the energy of the teacher to constantly come to him. He's not just sitting there, when will my teacher come? When will that happen? No, the pupil is constantly meditating upon the teacher, expecting the energy of the teacher, and his vehicles, his subtle body automatically becomes that refined. Now, all times, whenever this is happening, since the pupil is waiting for that teacher's instructions to come, for their blessings to come, they are also closed to lowered influences from happening. It's because they're thinking constantly of the higher beings, of the higher thoughts, that they're not distracted by any negative influences like anger, criticism, irritation, all of that stuff. Therefore, for the students, all of his higher vehicles from the astral body upwards, so physical, etheric, so physical, etheric, you can ignore, from the astral, mental, cause, and all the higher bodies upwards, they're opened up like a cup or a funnel. They're opened at the top, but they're closed at the sides, which means they again become impervious, not open to any of the lower negative influences. So it's like this. Now, this tuning up of the pupil continues throughout the period of discipleship. At first, his vibrations are several notches, several octaves below the vibration of the master, but since they are in tune with each other, his vibrations also are gradually being raised. So here's an interesting thing. If you have negative thoughts, negative feelings, any kind of negative tendencies, if you think of your spiritual teacher, if you think of your guru or a holy master, gradually that negative energy will cease to have an impact upon you, because your mind will be focused on the energy from the higher being. And I'll share this with you. I've recently had a loss in my family. I lost one of my pet dogs, okay? And I was very, very attached to them. She's one of my closest friends for more than 10 years. And at varying points in my studies, as I was supposed to prepare for this, I would find myself overcome by sadness, naturally. But as I work on this, as I think of the spiritual work that is to be done, to a great extent, all the unhappiness, the lack which I experience, is washed away and replaced by the memory of the happy times. And when I think of the happy times, the heart activates, thereby the crown activates, and the divine energy flows in more, making the work easier. So when you are going through a difficult time, think of your teacher, think of your higher beings. Like right now, I don't know if it's very visible, but right above my head over here is a photo of my teacher. Let's see if I can tilt the camera up just a little bit. There's a photo of my teacher right above. And I've tried to keep it so that he guides and blesses and heals throughout the process. So when you open yourself up to the influences and blessings of the higher beings, your life also improves and a lot of the negative influences bypass you. Now, throughout this process, as the pupil is connected to the teacher, the master is not, mind you, the master is not giving his full attention to each and every pupil individually, but rather the master is working on thousands and thousands of souls simultaneously, and he is doing his own work. Now, the master obviously has many levels of consciousness awareness. He will send down his blessings as and when the pupil requires it more and more. So according to the notes, which are given in the book, the pupil becomes an outpost of the master's blessings, of the master's consciousness, like an extension of him. The adept sees, hears, and feels through him. So whatever is done in his presence is done in the master's presence. So they are, for all practical purposes, one. They're experiencing so much of oneness. Now, this does not mean that the Great One, the Holy Master, is necessarily always conscious of events as and when they are happening. He may be, because he may be absorbed in some other work at that time. Nevertheless, because it is happening and the pupil is experiencing it, the master will have a memory of it. So what the pupil has experienced with reference to a particular subject will come into the master's mind as his own knowledge when he turns his attention to that subject. So if you've seen this movie, The Matrix, the first one, way back in 1999, there was one particular thing where Neo, the lead character, he needed to acquire the skill of Kung Fu or something of the sort, or how to fly a helicopter. So his physical body had a knowledge disk put into it or into the computer, and then through the wires and mechanisms, it was fed directly into his brain. His nervous system and his muscles adapted, and he just knew how to do it. And in the Matrix world, which is for us the real world, he was able to execute all those actions in a second. So imagine that you have the ability to absorb any kind of information and utilize it and become a master at it just by the presence of whoever else knows it. And that's one of the qualities of the Holy Master. Of course, we are not yet at that level, but it's something to aspire to nevertheless. Now, when a pupil sends a thought of devotion to his teacher, to his master, the slight flash which he sends produces an effect like the opening of a great valve. And there's a tremendous downpour of love and power from the master. And if the pupil sends out a thought which is of devotion, which is of a great deal of outpouring, it becomes not visible just as a spark, but as a stream of fire, a very powerful, very potent stream. So when such a thought of devotion is directed by a pupil to the master, the pupil is immediately, he is returned with a stream of fiery love from the master. So it's something that we can actually practice. If you know how to scan your spiritual cord, basic pranic healing and above, you can scan your spiritual cord right now. It should be a little thicker because of the nature of the discussion we're having. And if you visualize your teacher, if you like to just visualize, close your eyes, and you sit in a receptive posture and you visualize your spiritual teacher, and you say, I'm going to visualize Master Chua Kok Sui. Just visualizing him and say, Atma, Master Chua Kok Sui, Namaste. I, the soul, salute the divinity within you. I, the soul, recognize the spiritual teacher within you. I, the soul, am super receptive, super conductive on all levels to the divine energies passing through you. Yes, Master Chua Kok Sui. Thank you, Master Chua Kok Sui, with gratitude, respect, and love. And then for a few moments, I'll just project love to my teacher. And now, if you are so inclined, would you scan the size of the spiritual cord before and after? And if you please share what your findings are. Right. Did you find a difference? Do you find any change? Please do share. It's nice when everyone interacts. Right. Now, the adept's power, the higher being's power, is flowing outwards always in all directions like the rays of the sun. But the touch of the pupil's thoughts brings down a huge amount of energy on him for that moment. So it's as if you have a particular ray of sunlight directed on you at that particular point in time. Now, so perfect is the union between them that if there's any disturbance in the lower bodies of the pupil, like if I am very disturbed and unhappy and I'm that connected to my master, the master for that time will actually cut me off, will block me off, because that union is so strong, it might cause a disturbance in the master himself. So therefore, the holy beings will temporarily shut the pupil off. Now, of course, it's very sad for the pupil if they have to be cut off in this manner, but it is, of course, by their own doing. And then he can end the separation as soon as he wants by controlling his own thoughts and feelings and emotions. Now, usually such an unfortunate incident like being cut off by the Holy Master does not last longer than maybe 48 hours or so, according to the book. But there have been some cases where the rift has endured for days, weeks, and months, to the extent that the pupil has been completely disconnected from the higher beings for the remainder of their life. So it is in our better interests to be able to connect and stay connected at all times. Now, sometimes we have ups and downs. We're not aware of what is happening and the various spiritual resources which are available at our disposal. So as the book says, if the student has very little knowledge of the resources of nature, then there's not much they can do. But if they have a little bit of knowledge, if they have some amount of understanding, then he can often call the resources of nature to him for helping his work. Now, there are a many number of nature spirits of a certain type, both of the air, of the water, of the forests, who are very suitable for taking on the energy of certain thought forms, and they love being of service. So, for example, if you have a thought form of being of service, of helping, of healing, and you're taking a walk, maybe you're taking a walk in the forest, maybe you're walking in the fields, on the roads, somewhere which is not disturbed, somewhere which is kind of, so there's some privacy and there's not so much of noise and pollution. That's where the nature spirits would be. So when you have these thought forms of service, you have the thought form of healing, then you attract in your space these nature beings who can be a part of your aura. And then you can physically carry them along with you. And when you reach your destination, and you say, okay, I've reached this city, maybe you're flying, okay? Maybe you're flying from, I don't know, New York to Kuala Lumpur. And you've decided that you want to send blessings to your destination city. You may be carrying in your aura these nature spirits. And when you reach your destination and you send the blessings out, they will be happy to spread out to do the work. So by doing so, by opening yourself up as an instrument, you can radiate joy, and a certain amount of evolution also happens for the friendly nature spirit. Because then not only are you carrying your teacher's energy with you, that energy is directly helping them, and they are also directly helping your destination city. So you become an instrument, literally an instrument for service and evolution. Okay? So therefore, from this, you can understand that if a holy master wanted to transmit some energy, suppose, let's say, for example, there's a war happening and you want to direct blessings to a particular area, and the holy master needs to send physical energy to a particular area. Therefore, a student on the spot, on the field, is an invaluable asset. And that's what we must remember. At all times, we must make ourselves a good channel, because the pupil can, in that sense, be regarded as an additional body for doing the master's work. So purification is super duper important. And then, which comes to that every human body is in reality a transmitter for the powers of the self within. So according to this particular book, I'm not going so much into details over here, you can do certain activities. Like there's a story of a person who can take a glass, okay, and by concentrating his willpower, he can move that glass, he can make that tumble and fall down. But this particular guy required effort and hours activity and hours effort every day for 2 straight years. That's almost 700 days or 700 hours of effort. Whereas if you just wanted a glass to come into your hand, just get up and pick up the glass and drink from it. So it's more economical to conserve energy and not waste our energies in doing telekinetic things. Yeah. So in the earlier stages of the pupil's relationship with his master, he'll feel that there's a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of force, which is coming through him. And he doesn't know where it's going. All he can feel is that a great amount of living energy, fire-like energy, is rushing through him and flooding his surroundings, their surroundings. Now, with a little bit of attention, a little bit of practice, the student can learn to tell where that energy is going. And in some time, with that more practice, he becomes able to follow with their consciousness the rush of the master's power. And then he can actually trace the very people who are being helped. So say, for example, you're passing through an area or you're taking a walk in a poverty-stricken environment, or actually, you know what? Let's go back a few steps. Let's imagine that you live in a particular city, which you probably do, and you are on the spiritual path, which you probably are, and the higher beings are sending a huge amount of energy through you to be of service, which they're probably doing. With some practice, you start to sense, okay, where is this energy coming from? Okay, it's coming from the higher beings. Where is this energy going? And then as you become more and more refined, more and more sensitive, you find yourself taking a walk in a part of the city where you've never been before, and you find that there's some people who need help, who have been ignored, abandoned. And you start bringing them food, blankets, all sorts of things to help them. So with a little bit of attention, with a little bit of meditation and awareness, we can actually trace where the energy is going. Now, we, however, cannot direct that energy. We are simply being used as a channel. But at the same time, we're also being taught how to cooperate in the distribution of the force. So it's not just where the energy is going, the physical labor, the physical work is also taking place through us. So when we say the work is being done by us, that is quite literally true. In fact, that's a humble way of looking at it, because instead of saying, hey, did you do this? You can honestly say it was done by me. Like it wasn't done by you, but it was done by you. Get what I'm saying? So later on, there'll come a time when the master, instead of pouring that force directly into the pupil and aiming it at a person in a distant place, will tell the pupil, find the person, and then give him the force, right? So it's kind of like being used as a spiritual courier. The higher being comes and tells us, hey, look, I've been sending you on a courier journey for this all this time. Just go to the person directly and do the work. So whenever and wherever the pupil can do a little bit of the master's work, that is amazing. And the master will use the pupil for doing more and more and more such work. Because as more of the work is put into the hands of the student, the strain upon the holy master is relieved, because it is strenuous work, right? Now, usually a particular master will transmit force only to his particular students, all right? Won't be transmitted to any random person. But however, any person who's really, really trying to live a life of service, of refinement, can be used as a channel, can be used as an instrument. Now, it might happen, it has happened in the past, that in a particular location, there was no student directly available for a certain kind of energy required. But there were some other people who were not as advanced, but they were working, they were trying to make themselves better, and therefore they were used for that particular purpose. So in such a case, the master would probably use them. Now, many varieties of force are poured out by the master for different purposes. Sometimes one type of person is suitable, sometimes another kind of person is suitable. Sometimes a loving person is needed to do a certain kind of work, sometimes a more willful person is needed to do another kind of work. In all cases, you'll need an intelligent person to do the work. Okay, getting the work done by someone who is not of intelligence, well, that's one of the prerequisites. So anyway, watching the case of two students side by side, you can make out very clearly, understand that one student is used for one type of force and the other one is used for another type. And this outpouring, this energy is astral, mental, as well as buddhic, in addition to the physical. On the physical plane, this is important, on the physical plane, this energy comes out, finds expression through the hands and the feet. It's for this reason, well, it's for general reasons also, but it's mainly for this reason that great care must be taken about cleanliness. If the physical body of the selected person is unclean, is dirty, such a person would not be a suitable channel. It would be kind of like pouring water through a dirty pipe. It would not go very well. It would be filthy, it would be dirty. So it's the people who have to work with the masters, they need to take a great deal of care about their own physical purification. They need to ensure that they are clean, because if they're not, that's just going to make things quite not so nice. Okay. Now, as the force passes from the master to the student, they need to be open to the energy of the master. Now, sometimes the master will send the message to the pupil through a third party, because if the student is kind of busy, if they're not aware, then that energy might not make its way through. So then what happens? In such a situation, the message might be conveyed, via a third party. So who is the third party in this case? So here the author is relating a story that he was told to deliver a message to a very intellectual, very highly advanced member, okay, whom he did not personally know. So he just goes up to the person and says, I've been told by my master to give this message, and I'm simply doing what I've been told. I'm aware that I cannot give you any evidence that this has come from the master, but I leave you to attach your importance to it however you want to, but I have no option. I'm just following simple instructions. And of course, the guy on the other end, the man receiving the instruction, was absolutely bewildered. And he was very startled, and he said, you don't have to worry about persuading me that it's a message from the Holy Master, because the way you have worded the message, it can't be from anyone else. It has to be from the Master. And for you to know the meaning of what the Master has said, I don't expect you to understand. So the message was conveyed. The messenger had no idea, but the word was done. Now, for a regular person, for people like you, for me, we are studying these things. We are making an effort to understand. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes you need more study. But for the vast majority of the 7 billion people, 7.5 billion people, the vast majority of them, they are busy with taking care of the physical needs. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs: food, clothing, shelter, and then the higher ones come until eventually you get to self-actualization. So for those who are not making a study of these, who are just preoccupied with regular, mundane, everyday stuff, these activities are separate. They are ununderstandable, okay? Because there's no conscious communication within them. What they understand to be a state of wakefulness or awakenedness is basically his consciousness working through his physical brain. And when the body is fast asleep, the consciousness works through the astral body. So therefore, this is important. If a dead man, if a dead person, or a Kamadeva, I'll explain Kamadeva later, wants to communicate with such a person, they can do it. So you and me, since we've studied this, since we are studying, since we are purifying, since we are trying to get more control over our astral body and our subtle bodies, we are open to the communication of those who've passed away or with beings of energy. We can meet them face to face in the astral world, just as if we were meeting them in the physical world. Or in some way, the energy beings can form a sort of presence, like a physical form without a physical body. This would we have covered in the Invisible Helpers book. And we can communicate with them. Now, the question is, what is a Kamadeva? Kamadeva is it's two words, Kama meaning desire, and Deva meaning like a deity or a god. And according to theosophy, it's a desire for love, for goodness, for compassion and mercy. Okay. If you want to understand more about Kamadevas and these various beings, you can go through our study on the astral plane, on the astral matter. Then you can get more details on that in that particular book study. So in essence, we are equipped to deal with, to communicate with those who have passed away. And imagine how brilliantly comfortable that can be, how wonderful that would be for people who need that comfort from us. Now, there have been many instances of people who have not refined their faculties or their abilities. These are the people who you would find as they exaggerate their words. They exaggerate a lot of their thoughts, their actions. So to answer the first question, which was asked in the beginning of the chapter, that what happens when we use phrases like damn good or awfully nice and stuff like that. So this has an impact on the way we perceive things. So just as a person whose faculties are beginning to open up in the inner world, they're seeing and hearing and experiencing many things which they cannot understand, which they have no words for explaining. And therefore, they usually use their primary sense, which is the sense of sight, to explain and describe what they're seeing. And it's only after years and years and years of experience and practice that they can actually become more reliable in transmitting what they've seen, not adding on their own preconceived ideas. And that is where many of us initially tend to go wrong. It's because what's happening in the energy world cannot be expressed adequately in the physical world with physical words. As we refine, as we purify, then it finds better application. Now you got to understand that the higher beings would not necessarily just communicate with us from the astral world. It's easier because it's grosser, closer to us, but they keep their consciousness on a very high plane of existence. Now, there are many planes of existence. We've got the physical one, of course, which you live in. We've got the energy one, which we work with as healers. You've got the etheric, the energy plane. You've got the astral or the emotional plane. Above that, you've got the mental plane. Above that, you've got the causal plane. And then you've got the buddhic, the nirvanic, and so on and so on and so on until there are, at least in one of the books, it talks about 13 such planes. Okay, but we deal with up to the causal for now. And the holy masters, they keep their consciousness focused on the nirvanic plane. Now, of course, the holy masters at any instant, they can bring their consciousness down to a plane which is easy for us to communicate to. But the amount of effort which they have to expend in order to bring it down to that particular level is usually a lot of work. Try to think of it this way, that you have to explain your profession to a 5-year-old. You have to explain what you do to a 5-year-old kid in such a way that the kid understands and can explain it to another kid. Now, for you to be able to reword and rephrase everything in that matter would be a little complicated. It would not be impossible, but it would be kind of difficult. Now, imagine what the Holy Master, who's like several planes above, if they have to condense their vocabulary and their ideas and everything and bring it to our level for us to be able to do certain things. It's usually not worth their time to do so, not for regular people. So when we are out of our body, when we're in the astral and mental vehicle, and as you're working on refining them, we make it easier for us to go up, then the higher beings find it easier to come down and communicate. Is this part clear? Are there any questions that you might have had until this point? If you do, please do let me know in the chat or on text, then we'll try and answer them. But I hope this part, these complicated topics are being made a little easier to digest. Okay. Now, on the physical plane, we may put our thoughts and emotions into spoken words. We may be saying certain things. We may be explaining certain things which are so much easier with physical words. However, these words and emotions are irrelevant in the higher planes. Why? Because in the higher planes, there is no usage of such vocabulary. Everything is explained by a thought. You think of something, an image of that, like for example, if I think of, say, a ball, I don't have to say, oh, this is a spherical thing, it's this size, this shape, this texture, has this written on it. I think of a ball and boom, thought form of a ball just pops straight up. I think of a particular book and that comes straight up. I think of the subject matter in the book and that also comes straight up. So the other person doesn't need to waste their time in trying to pick out these cumbersome words and what their meaning might be. They can just read it and understand it and know it. And that's that. Now, as a rule, each thought, each emotion has its own separate form. So you have a thought form, an emotional form. And it's when they're mixed together, we find that the colors, the shapes, the sizes, they all blend. And you can read that and interpret that. It's like every time you have a thought of something, you want to do something, you put up a cinema of the whole thing, which another person can see, read, and understand. Now, just suppose that we try to raise ourselves in imagination to that high part of the mental plane on which our energy meets that of our higher soul. So then the communication that's happening over there is entirely energetic. Entirely energetic. There's no language. The main thing is that the higher soul does not use words or sentences and does not express such things as A, B, C, D, E. It's all of this all together right now. So this is a very interesting way in which my mentor explains certain things. It's like we experience life. You can think of your life, our lives, as walking from a room. Okay, suppose you can imagine there are three rooms: room one, room two, room three. One, two, three. Okay, you are in room number two right now, or we are in room number two right now. We've just come from room number one, that's the past. We're in room number two, that's the present, and ahead of us is room number three, the future. And we're constantly walking. We are constantly walking forward. So room two is perpetually becoming room one. The present, the immediate present is becoming the immediate past. The immediate future is becoming the immediate present. And we're walking forward and forward and forward. And the only thing we can see is what is directly in front of us, or maybe a little distance in front of us. But for the higher soul, for the great beings, they're like an architect. So they are not seeing separate rooms. They're looking at the entire blueprint of the building. They're looking at the entire blueprint of the building. They can see where you were, where you are, and where you might potentially be, depending on which room you decide to walk into. So they experience everything happening right now. The dinosaurs are alive right now. We are living in Mars right now. The Big Bang has happened, and also the Great Crunch has happened. Everything has happened right now, or is happening right now. I hope I've been able to convey a sense of an idea of how the higher beings try to communicate. Now, obviously, when we're saying that they don't use language and words to communicate, instead they use images. But here I'm stuck with the limitation of words, still trying to explain. So if you've had any difficulty understanding, it's a shortcoming from my side, not what the subject matter is about. So anyway, as the book continues to say, when a subject comes to the Holy Master and they see it before him, they know everything about it, and they want to convey an idea to another person, it's as if he threw him a kind of ball, which somehow includes knowledge, inferences, references, all in one. Now, the pupil has for many, many years been accustomed to transmit the messages for the master. He will, through that association, through that time, be able to attain a great facility and accuracy in translating. He'll be able to convey the message exactly as it is, for the most part, not getting any distortions. So there will be very, very few distortions from his side when he's explaining certain things. Even so, there will be certain distortions happening here and there because of the time that they're born in, the surroundings, and other factors. But for the most part, the way they're expressing it will be accurate. Now, if you remember our previous book study, this is from the book Man, Visible and Invisible, there are a number of illustrations which are presented here on the screen, okay? Which you see the mental body of the average person, the astral body of the average person. Basically, you see an illustration, photographs of, well, pictures of human beings at different stages of their progress. Why am I holding on to this? Of their progress. Now, each part of this vehicle of their bodies are in relation to the astral or mental world around them. Like if you're a very happy person, but around you there's been a tragedy, then it is accepted that it is understandable that you will also feel sad. It would not be nice if people are mourning and they're unhappy and you go and say, hey, so happy, so grateful, la la la. You're just going to come across as insensitive, which by the way is something that we on the spiritual path, we tend to do a lot. Think about it. We are aware of the journey of the soul. We are aware that it's just the physical vehicle which has stopped. Everything is energy. They're moving into the energy body and everything is happening on the higher levels. But instead of allowing the other person, the aggrieved person, time to grieve or to be sad, we start talking about the soul and energy and say, don't cry, don't get your astral body like this, don't get your mental body like this, higher beings will think this, Holy Master will think that. Where's the compassion? As spiritual people, as people on the spiritual path, it's great that we know these things, but the expression of it has to be in a kind manner, in a loving manner, in an understanding fashion. So we need to deliver our message to the right people at the right time. We must remember that all of these things which are happening are not happening in isolation. They're happening in conjunction, in relationship to everything that is happening around us. We cannot always just be thinking about spirituality, but not helping people who have not eaten. There has to be a practical element, an understanding and compassionate element to the work that we do. On this note, those who meditate upon their spiritual teacher, upon their master for a very, very long time, they produce a very strong thought form, thought image of him. And they find that when they connect to the master sends the energy down, and that thought energy also becomes that much more stronger. So the person who wants to be accepted by the Holy Master, those who really want to be initiated, they must watch themselves very, very closely. Because if they have not gotten any hint or any instruction that they have certain character flaws which they need to work upon, they will not be accepted. So if we know that, okay, I am short-tempered, or I am too critical, or I am overtly emotional about certain things, or I get triggered, we know that we have our shortcomings. We are aware of it. It's not that we're completely oblivious to our own shortcomings, correct? So we need to watch ourselves. We need to watch our thoughts, our words, our actions. And we try to minimize in our practical life using sentences, using words which are hurtful, which are contradictory, which are exaggerations. Our work may require, for example, sometimes I write. My work may require that I have to write certain things for a client to convey a certain message. But if I'm utilizing those words, that phraseology all the time, that would not be great. Conversely, I could start seeking out clients who don't have to depend on exaggeration for my earning. Now that's one example. Obviously, if you're a teacher or an academician, an academic, if you're an academic, then you will obviously not be able to choose which students come to you. You're not going to just choose that I'm going to quit working this job and work somewhere else. You will have to find some sort of an other middle ground. What that middle ground is, that's up to you. That is sort of like your test, you're passing. Okay. The pupil must be extremely careful that there is no exaggeration or impurity about the way they communicate. They have to keep their thoughts, words, and actions must be lofty. Now, they also must not be so bothered, so caught up in like, oh, I have to watch my thoughts, words, and actions, that they are so tense all the time that they can't relax. Because in all the work which we must do, we have to have a balance. There must be calmness and balance, not working all the time. Because according to the Holy Masters, as you can see here, overwork, which is not uncommon among the young and enthusiastic people, shows a lack of wisdom. Each of us should do as much as we can, but we should not exceed our limits. So don't be lazy. At the same time, don't overdo things. At the same time, don't be constantly tense. It's just a lot of requirements. Don't this, don't that, don't this, don't that. But hey, that's why we are on this particular path, to become a better person and a better soul, and not necessarily just do and behave as we did 5, 10, 15 years ago, assuming that's the target there. Now, the thing is, here's where it gets really interesting. This is from here where the book becomes personally very exciting for me. Because you see, as we do, yes, correct, balance on all levels, because as we do the good stuff, as we do good things, there's a very curious law of nature which will cause balance at all levels, which means that whenever there's a huge outpouring of great divine energy, there's also a corresponding outpouring of undesirable negative energy. Now, it may seem strange, but that's the way it is. The great ones, when they work for evolving, for making things happen, they allow the whole situation, the whole equation to remain balanced. So there are negative influences. Now, we can think of this in a, like if there's date all the time, if there's day all the time, then we won't appreciate the night. But if there's night all the time, we can't appreciate the day. We need both. If we're always very happy all the time, we won't appreciate it. There has to be a bit of sadness for us to appreciate the happiness. If we are privileged all the time, we will not understand what it is like. You get the idea, right? You get what I'm trying to say. In order to keep this whole balance going, there has to be a fairness. With a tremendous outpouring of light, there is also darker powers. And there are people who follow an absolutely different line compared to ours, a line which brings them into collision with this theosophy, with spirituality and all. Naturally, this opposition affects not just the holy masters. The dark forces don't just affect the holy masters, they affect us as well, because we are connected to them. And an example of this, which I'm going to be reading out over here, an example of this is someone on the darker side, they'll come and say, you think you see around you signs of evolution, signs of union towards God. And you think that is the will, that is the desire of God. However, that is a test. God is testing you. Instead of wanting you to become one and dissolve yourself, he wants you to assert your individuality. He wants you to assert your rights in spite of everything which tells you that, oh, you must be one. So if you spend any amount of time on the internet, you'll have a lot of people who echo this sentiment. That don't listen to what everyone else is saying. Assert your individuality. You are you. You have to stand up for yourself. It's you, you. I, me. It's self-ish. It is self-ish. Therefore, they will always try to take away our thought process from the union, from the unity of everything, and try to bring it towards individuality. Your problems, your solutions, your pain, your healing, you. So in some way, this is balance. There's complete selfishness, there's complete selflessness. We have to find the middle path, which is a healthy self-interest, as Master Choa Kok Sui says, a healthy balance in between. So we should put aside lower things, we should aim for the higher things, and we will be influenced by the opposite sides, but we have to try and work and find the middle path. But you see, the negative sides, they cannot touch us, they cannot hold us, they cannot affect us as long as we keep ourselves, our thoughts, full of the blessings of the masters. And there's a story which which is recited over here, is that there was a man in theosophy who had a lot of power, a lot of knowledge, a lot of reading. And had he actually become a black magician, he would have been really, really powerful. But for the most part, he worked on the path of light. He did good things, but he was a kind of an unscrupulous kind of person. And he had a passion for knowledge, for knowing things. And he would have done anything, sometimes even shady, not so good things, to get more knowledge. So he found one particular person, he found a particular member in this theosophical society, this lady who had a lot of potential, and he wanted to hypnotize her. He wanted to mesmerize her and put her under his spell so that he could unlock her subconscious mind and really explore and take it to great heights. That's what he wanted to do. He told her of her plan, of his plans, and she said, no, I am not interested. This is not to my interest, not to my liking. Please leave me alone. I don't want to do this. What did he do? He used astral projection and he materialized astrally when she was asleep. And in that state, when she was asleep, she was somewhat aware. He tried to hypnotize and take her under his control, to manipulate. And she grew very frustrated. She grew very scared, didn't know what to do. And then she grew angry. How dare you do these things? How dare you take me against my will? And she thought of the holy masters. She thought of the holy masters and said, help. And at that exact instant, the moment she said help, she felt a tremendous downpour of energy, white light. She was surrounded by white light. And this doctor, this unscrupulous doctor, vanished. Or rather, he was flung to the far end of the room and then he vanished. Gone. Then the white light disappeared and she was still awake, half asleep. And all she felt was a tremendous amount of sympathy and compassion for this guy, for this doctor, who didn't know any better. All he knew was power, the acquisition of power, and how to manipulate people. If he used his powers for good, he could have gone very far. Instead, he chose to do this. And so the energy of the Holy Master came down as a form of protection. This is a lesson for us. This is actually a gift for us, that if we are going through anything difficult where we feel that we are being attacked, that some people they've sent cords on us, or they've given the evil eye. Sometimes we go through things in life which are not so nice. We can simply invoke and ask the holy masters for help, for protection. So in fact, we're going to do that right now, right? I'm like making these things practical, so we're going to do that right now. What we're going to do is, we're going to sit, we're going to invoke and say to the Supreme God, to my spiritual teacher, to all the spiritual teachers, to the holy masters, to the angels, we invoke for divine help, divine guidance, divine protection. Thank you for blessing our homes and protecting our homes at all levels from any forms of psychic intrusion, psychic attack, psychic contamination, black magic. Thank you for protecting all our family members, loved ones. Thank you for protecting our family and friends. Thank you for your help, for your guidance, for your protection. May all the negative energies which are directed towards us, towards our loved ones, our family, our home, our pets, our belongings, may all negative attacks and influences directed towards us be transmuted and be raised to higher vibrations. We thank you in full faith. Take a deep breath. Feel a wave of gratitude directed to the teacher and say thank you. Right. So what this does, how do you feel, by the way? How is everyone feeling? What this does is, it brings a form of protection all around us, our family, our loved ones. You probably feel a sense of quietness, quietude in us. And secondly, we do not bounce the negative energy back to the sender. We don't just take the negative energy and say, right back at you. No, instead, if the negative energy is coming to us, we've caught hold of it and we're raising it to higher vibrations. We're raising it so that it cannot go back and hurt whoever has sent it. Otherwise, it's just going to become a back and forth of negative energy going round and round. Instead, it's come to you, you've caught hold of it, you ask for the higher beings, get rid of it. Raise it to higher vibrations, disintegrate the negative energy. And therefore, in your own way, by asking for help and protection, you have removed just that much amount of darkness in your life and brought in that much amount of light. Okay. I'll need about 15 more minutes, then we'll cover both chapters today, as I promised last time. Is that okay? Because this part is pretty self-explanatory, that the pupil must make up their minds with regard to their efforts, that they'll never allow themselves to be discouraged by failure, even though that failure is repetitive. However many times they may have failed, they need to keep going. Because in the physical world, there are many things which are impossible. It's not possible to lift 1,000 kilos just like that, no matter how long you've been working out. But in the inner world, we are able to lift ourselves up over years and years of depression and sadness and oppression and misery. We have that entire power of the whole divine host to take us, lift us, our loved ones, and take us to the next level. So people can often say that I can deal with things on the physical level, but it's very difficult to do anything on the astral and mental ones. But that's the reverse of the truth. That is completely the opposite. It's because they're not accustomed to thinking about fine matter, about fine things, that things seem to go wrong. But as soon as they set their will, that, you know what, I can and I will, things start to happen. And in the inner world, what happens in the energy world impacts the physical world. So if you have a loved one who needs special attention, visualize them happy, healthy, communicating, doing all the things which they should do, which would also improve the quality of their life and the quality of your life. Visualize and project that energy to them. If you're traveling, visualize that you are carrying with you a lot of divine energy. You've asked for angelic beings to help you, that you're traveling to your city of destination, to your destination, and the energy is going there and blessing every person, every being. Visualize a safe transit, a safe flight, absolutely easy customs and immigration, that you've gone to your venue and everything's great. You can visualize for your finances that your bank balance is multiplied 20, 30, 40 times. That instead of getting X amount of money per month, you're now getting 5 times that amount of money and life is good. And that's just the self part of things. You can visualize that the air has cleared, that the pollution has stopped, that there are no more plastics and garbage flying in the ocean, that the fish are happy and healthy, that the forest fires and earthquakes have stopped, that climate change has been reversed. There's so much we can do just by controlling and paying attention to our thoughts, which then brings us to understanding. This chapter will not take too long, maybe 15 minutes or so, on other ways in which we are presented to the higher beings. Because all this while, the higher beings have been using us as an apprentice. They've been prepared, trained, nurtured for presenting to the great white brotherhood for initiation. Now, initiation is a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about that next time. And if you're following the social media channels on Pranaworld, look out for it. You'll have some interesting stuff on Facebook and Instagram coming up in the next 24 hours or so, talking about initiations. And the whole purpose of initiations, of all this entire exercise, is to help promote the work of evolution. Because the master knows that when the pupil is ready, there'll be an honor, there'll be a kind of ceremony, and they will be of much greater use into the world. Okay. So just like you have a school system, we gave this example long back, that you're being trained by a teacher, then you go higher up until eventually you graduate, and then you're given a degree. Now, the degree which you get is not given to you by your teacher or by the principal of the school. Instead, it's being given by the university. You receive a degree from the University of, say, Oxford, or from the School of Hard Knocks. You don't receive a degree from teacher XYZ, from Mr. Smith or John Doe, do you? It's signed there as a witness that the university gave this to you. So likewise, in the inner world, in the higher worlds, you too are recognized as a person of a certain caliber by the energy. It doesn't matter whether you have a certificate which says that or not. A certificate is no guarantee of spiritual evolution. Your own work, your own service is what matters. Okay, so the probationary path, this whole thing that we've been talking about, the first 2 or 3 lessons, the thing of preparations and then acceptance, is a stage which takes us to the actual path, from the probationary path to the path proper, which happens at the first initiation. And in the Eastern books, in the Oriental books, these paths are described very abstract in a very impersonal sense. So people may ask, okay, if they are spiritual paths and they exist in the inner world, how do we as ordinary people know about the existence of a path in the first place? Right? It's a very logical question. If everything of this is in the inner world, how do we know about it? Is it just someone's fantasy? Well, the thing is, there are 4 ways in which we can come to the path of spiritual development. The first one, which the one talks about, is being in the presence of and getting to know people who are already interested in that line. So some of us in the Middle Ages, for example, could have been priests or nuns, and we may have come in contact with some saints over there who are really, really helping the people in the physical world, in the inner world. So at that time, it might be that we did not think of the importance that would come to us of helping other people. But because we had an inclination of that in our past lives, in this life, we've come upon the subject. So the first one is by being in the presence of and getting to know those who are already interested in that path. So the first way is of those who know about it. Second one is by knowing, reading, hearing about it. So there are 2 ways in which people are led to the path, is by reading about it or hearing about it, and by being in close association with those who are already treading it. So for example, you've joined the Esoteric Study Club, and then, I don't know, you tell some people that, hey, you know what? I know about this, I know about that. And they say, how do you know that? It's like, well, it's because we are studying this. And then their latent interest might also get awakened. So you progress by helping other people progress. The third way, which is mentioned in the spiritual books, is by thinking, by intellectual development. By sheer force of thinking, a person may understand some of these principles, although that's kind of like a rare thing. So this would be sort of like a type of yoga, maybe Gyan Yoga, which is the yoga of oneness through knowledge, through, what are the different types of yogas, if anyone knows, if you could just write down in the chat. I'm a little fuzzy on it. Because I know there's Karma Yoga, there's Bhakti Yoga, there's Raj Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Kundalini, and all sorts of other things. So this particular one, the third type, would be the yoga of Gyan or knowledge. And there's sort of a fourth way, okay? Sort of fourth way that in the long practice, people may develop by simply doing the right thing over and over and over again. that they do the right thing, the good thing, they serve and they help and they heal and so on, so much that eventually the path opens up in front of them automatically. For that, however, they need to have certain characteristics, and this is something which is there in the tenets of Buddhism or Hinduism. There are 4 qualities which is needed for coming across the path. The first one is viveka, or discrimination. It is the discrimination between what is real and what is fake, or what is apparent. Like the inner world is real, this is all fake because everything's going to die, everything's going to finish. It's the inner world which is real. There's vairagya. Vairagya means the sense of detachment. Detachment from what? From being attached, overtly attached. Thank you, Kunal. Gyan, Karma, Raja, Bhakti, and Hatha, some of the yogas. There's Kundalini yoga too, right? There are many types. So vairagya is the sense of detachment. So first, awareness, discernment. Second is detachment. Third is what is called mumuksha. Okay, I'm sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong, but that is a desire for liberation, a burning desire that I don't want to be dependent on things for happiness. Buying a mobile phone brings me happiness now, but I don't want to be in a state that if I lose my mobile phone, I've lost all my happiness. Owning things, purchasing things, retail therapy might give me a lot of joy, but that means if the thing is gone, I am unhappy. So the mumukshavutam is a mumukshatvam is a way of being liberated from all the material things which impact our lives. And eventually from that, we move on to something which is known as the Shat Sampatti. I'm going to go into that little detail. Next slide. On the left side, you have these 4 types of qualities: the discrimination, the detachment, acquiring the 6 treasures on the side, and the desire for liberation. And Master Chokuksi, he tells a story. There's a particular story in the Indian tradition. There was a man who went to a guru and said, I want enlightenment. And the guru was like, how badly do you want it? The guy was like, I really want to be enlightened. So what the teacher did was he caught hold of the guy, dragged him to the bank of the river, and submerged his head under the water. And the guy was thrashing about and bubbling and frothing, unable to breathe. And after some time, he brought the guy's head out, and the guy breathed in huge gulps of air. So the teacher asked the man, when you were underwater, what was the one thing you desired the most? And the man said, I wanted air, obviously. So the teacher says, if you desire liberation as much as you desire air, you will have it. If you desire enlightenment as much as you desire air, you'll have it. And that is mumukshatva, the intense longing, the intense overpowering desire to be free. But for that, you need to have discernment, discrimination, and you need to have these qualities, which is number 1, shama, or controlling your mind; dhamma, controlling your sense organs; titiksha, enduring pain as well as pleasure without reacting; uparati, which means your mind is withdrawn from external influences; shraddha, which is faith, devotion to the teacher and God; and samadhan, which means one-pointed focus. So you need to control your mind, you need to control your organs, which means that if someone, you don't be a prey to your don't just be consuming things with your sense organs. Don't just be eating and good smells and good touch and all that stuff. Your mind needs to be controlled, your body and organs need to be controlled. If good things happen, okay, I don't react. If bad things happen, this too shall pass. In fact, the phrase this too shall pass is a very good one, because then you can pass through the negative as well as the positive, and it doesn't affect you. Go to Parati, Shraddha, and Samadhan. Now, these qualifications which have been described here is written in the book "And the Feet of the Master," which follow this same structure. It was given by Shankaracharya, then the Buddha, and all the great spiritual teachers at different points in time. All of that knowledge has been sort of condensed and presented here for easy understanding. Now, of course, we will need to have our own effort. We will need to put in our own amount of study and use our willpower, use our intelligence, and have our compassion. It's only after developing all these preliminary requirements, all these qualities, that we can really, like the pupil on the path can really take steps, physical, etheric steps, astral steps, mental steps, and beyond, to take care and heal and help and be of service. Okay? When they really use their willpower to do things, that's the first ray in which willpower is utilized to do things, to progress. The second one can be done through love. The candidate must practice a huge amount of devotion, of reverence. They must understand and see everything in the field of light, or field of love. See everything from the perspective of love. So the wise ones who know the essence of things will teach you the wisdom. So another way of finding the great ones is through bhakti yoga. The first one is of willpower. The second one, so could be Raj Yoga. The second one is of bhakti yoga, of doing things to love. The third one is that of the mind, in which you discriminate, you put your vivek first. It's very important. So that's ray 3. It's very important for those whose minds are very technical. Like you think of a point of light, you're like, what's the point of light? Am I looking at it from above or below or the sides? Let's use this as a point ball of light. So think of light, white light. Okay, how big is the light? How small is the light? Am I seeing it from here? Am I seeing it from there? What is my field of view? Is it like a drone shot? How is this? Is the light moving? Is it orbiting? All that kind of things. So those who have a very discriminatory, understanding kind of mind will find their liberation through the ray 3, through the love wisdom approach. The fourth school is that of physical activity, hatha yoga. Now, rightly understood, this involves a severe physical purification intended to bring the body into a state of health, functioning, and refinement, so that the higher soul, the divine spark, the higher soul, the higher beings, they can use the physical body as a clean and clear instrument. No obstacles, no blockages. Okay, that's the fourth school. The fifth school, which is denominated as Lay Yoga. Lay here means rhythm. This requires the unlocking of the higher faculties through Kundalini. If you're doing Arhatic Yoga, you've already practiced Kundalini. You know what Kundalini energy is. It's a serpent energy, the serpent power, which usually remains asleep, dormant at the base of the spine. And it goes up through the chakras until it reaches the top. And then that power is awakened. Now here the book says 7 chakras. The key is it's not just 7, there are more chakras. And finally, you've got the sixth school, which is that of bhakti or complete devotion. So this is also taught to a very large extent in the Bhagavad Gita, where they don't just pray for personal favors, but to be used as an instrument and channel for service. In fact, the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi also says this: Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's despair, let me sow hope. And he goes on and on until he says, Lord God, grant me that I may seek not so much to be consoled as to console, to be loved as to love. So when we're on that path, our objective is not so much that people should understand us, that people should love us, that people should care for us. Instead, the perspective is flipped, that I'm here for you. I'm here to help you. I'm here to clear your doubts. I'm here to love you and support you. Lord God, grant me the strength, the wisdom, and all that which I need to be able to help other people. You can't serve on an empty stomach. So obviously, if you pray to God for wealth and abundance, you're suddenly an overnight multimillionaire, you can use your newfound millions to feed, to clothe, to shelter. So that's another form of devotion and service. And eventually, finally, we come to the seventh school, which in India is called mantra yoga. This is again a topic of great personal interest to me. And this is a very deep topic because the word mantra is a Sanskrit word, which you can use equivalent like it's a charm or a spell or something. It's like Wingardium Leviosa. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. Sorry, I get carried away with Harry Potter sometimes. I'd like to explain mantra a little bit in a different context. You see, the word mantra has in its root the word man, M-A-N, if you read that. It doesn't mean man as a human being, but the mind. In Sanskrit, the word mind is called the man. And tra, T-R-A, means to churn. It comes from the word trahi. Okay, so the churning of the mind. A certain sequence of words and rhythm will churn the mind to produce a certain result. Now, why do you churn the mind? To calm it, to soothe it, to balance it out. So there are many, many ways in which we can attain enlightenment. Mantra is one of them. There's another one which is called Tantra. Tan means body, which uses physical inputs. It's different from Hatha Yoga. Tantra, which is used to churn the body. Sometimes you have some exorbitant practices like body modifications or very sexual practices, which you may have read of in, say, Da Vinci, the Da Vinci Code, Hieros Gamos, or Angels and Demons, those books by Dan Brown, where they go into all these kinds of things. There's also a movie, I think Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut, something like that, where this element of using the body, overloading the body with sense inputs and sense pleasures to produce a certain spiritual end result. So you've got mantra for the mind, tantra for the body, and then you've got another vehicle which use circuitry or energy patterns that is called yantra. Yantra and tantra are outside of our scopes of study right now, so I'm not going into that. In fact, it's not even mentioned in the book. So we are going to go into mantra, and we're almost at the end of it, because if you have to classify the mantra according to a simplistic way of looking, there are those that work simply by faith, those that work by association, those that work by agreement, those that work by their meaning, and eventually those that work by their sound, the sound alone. Okay. Example of those that work by faith is like sometime someone got bitten by someone got injured in a fight. Someone got injured in a fight, and this kid, supposed to be a very refined, very nice kid, comes out and say, "Oh, I'll heal you. Your head is cut," and started chanting the mantra, some mantra. And the people nearby, they're like, this kid is very special. It's like really amazing. Was born when the skies aligned and the planets aligned and the stars aligned, and people started singing, so on. So anyway, everyone expected the kid to be able to perform a miracle. And it's because that thought form was created and the sound was produced, the miracle happened, the guy's bleeding stopped. So that's one example that just works simply by faith. There are those mantras which work by association, because certain thought forms, certain sound forms bring with them definite ideas, and they can manipulate and change the way we think and the way we feel. An example of this is the national anthem, as you read on the screen over here, because the tune of the national anthem, your national anthem, my national anthem, any of them, it's very simple and strong, but it's hardly a song. Okay, the words are poetry. Okay, it's nothing super. But if you think of this as a song amongst 100 other songs, it's unlikely to gather your attention. But we associate with it a certain meaning. The idea being that there's a power, there is an entity, a being in charge of the country, and we are giving our support in turn that we may be supported. So this evokes a definite response, because according to the rule, according to spiritual rules, any energy which is poured out unselfishly will call down a corresponding amount of divine power. So you sing the national anthem with the spirit of service and devotion, of helping everyone, and the higher beings ensure that that's what happens. So this response comes from certain types of angels who work with the Ray One. And the attention of these angels is attracted whenever the national anthem is sung, and they pour their blessings out upon the people who feel that sense of belonging, that sense of loyalty. So that's the second type, association. Now, there are two more types. There's some people, some monks in certain sects, they will chant a certain mantra over and over and over and over again. In fact, we went to a monastery some years back where this old monk, I think he was in his 80s, the only thing he would ever say was Om Mani Padme Hum. You heard this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum? You asked him, how are you? Om Mani Padme Hum. Have you eaten? Om Mani Padme Hum. Are you happy with this? Om Mani Padme Hum. Literally, the only thing he would say, now of course I'm exaggerating, to produce a certain kind of understanding. But this gentleman, this monk, dedicated more than 50, 60 years, 70 years of his life to just chanting Om Mani Padme Hum over and over and over and over again. Okay. So such mantras can be used in many, many ways, and they produce many types of different results. Okay. Because of this, they generate a certain kind of power through which they can give blessings. Now, mantras, since they work only by sound, or some of them work only by sound, they can set aside a tremendous wave of vibrations which produce an effect in the surroundings. And this effect, when it comes in contact with our subtle bodies, they produce certain deep results. And while these bodies may not be affected by the physical sound, by the physical matter, they will have an effect on the etheric matter, on the energetic matter. We will come into more detail on this the next time. Getting into more details about the mantra chanting, we might practice some of our own. As of now, this brings us to the end of the 6th chapter. Thank you all so much for joining in. I hope to see you for the next one. We will be concluding it in another 2 or 3 sessions at most. I hope you've had a good session. Thank you so much for joining in. Atma Namaste. This is Orko on behalf of Prana World. Let us end with an invocation. To the Supreme God, Divine Father, Divine Mother, to my spiritual teacher, to all the spiritual teachers, the holy gurus, holy masters, saints, archangels, holy angels, and spiritual helpers, to the beings of light, to my higher soul, to my divine self, thank you for giving us an opportunity to gather together as a group, to learn, to understand, to use this information to live a better life, a happier life, and to be of service. We thank you for giving us this opportunity in full faith. Thank you. Take a deep breath. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. Atma Namaste. See you for the next one. Bye.